It's well, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting to order. We're privileged to meet on the Stalo unceded traditional territory of Chilliwack, Palalt, and Samath. The entire school district had the opportunity to participate in an Pro-D Day dedicated to truth and reconciliation on October 6th. So I wanted to thank all of the staff for coming out for that day. And one of the things that really spoke to me was one of our speakers, Keith Carlson, talked about how settler Canadians have this real idea of the sense of freedom of movement. It's even enshrined in our Constitution. And that Indigenous people are very, their customs and their language and everything is tied very much to the land and to place. And so when we do land acknowledgements, I think it's an acknowledgement of that specifically, that the Stalo people are the original caretakers of this land that we have our school district on. So I just wanted to mention that. The board also acknowledges the marginalization that many members of our community have experienced, whether as a result of race, sexual orientation and gender identity, or other personal circumstances. The board is committed to providing a working and learning environment that recognizes the inherent dignity of all persons, that is inclusive of all, and that treats everyone with respect. Okay, trustees. I would like a motion to adopt the agenda, please. Trustee Reed and seconded by Trustee Bondar. Any errors or omissions in the agenda? All right, all those in favor of adopting the agenda as circulated? That's unanimous. Thank you, trustees. That carries. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes, please? Trustee Swanky, seconded by Trustee Westerby. Any errors or omissions in the minutes? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes as circulated? That's unanimous. Thank you, trustees. Okay, we are moving on to information items. So we've got 2.1 budget timelines and financial reporting. Secretary Treasurer.
So this is a fairly brief, just walking you through what's on the screen. You've got in front of you a chronological list of key budget milestones for this school year. They result in basically three different things happening. Oops, lost my notes here. The actual, spending, we're keeping track of that. We're going to do an amended budget come February, so there's provision for that, and preparing for the 24-25 budget. There's engagement of a budget committee prior to and informing board deliberations of the budgets, and there's some additional board focused discussions, which is consistent with prior years. So just to help us all keep track of things. And it's consistent with policy, I should say.
All right, trustees, are there any questions about the budget timeline? Just for new trustees and any members of the public, it is showing that we end up dealing with both this year's budget and next year's budget simultaneously. So that's what this is about. If you want to take a look at that in the package later, and really, if you didn't get a chance to look at it, it was kind of confusing sometimes which budget we're talking about. But we're kept in line by Secretary Treasurer here. All right. So seeing no questions, we're moving on to 2.2 BCSTA report. That would be Trustee V.
Yeah, thank you. So once again, I have some dates to make note of. Provincial Council is coming up on October 20th and 21st. I'll be attending that as well, Trustee Swanky. The Academy is coming up November 23rd to 25th. Information about that has already been put out, including some of the speakers, I think. So some upcoming deadline dates, which are in the emails that we received, but just to highlight them, October PC motions, the deadline was September 20th. February motions for Provincial Council the deadline is January 24th. AGM extraordinary motions, February 8th, and AGM substantive motions, February 16th, if you want to start anticipating any advocacy on that front. I urge you to check your email for branch dates, including branch meeting, leadership training, and other items which have been emailed to us that we can set aside in our calendar now. A reminder that BCSA does have several online training options, including values-based, evidence-informed decision-making, planning for student success, and financial and resource management, which are, again, linked in the email. So I just wanted to highlight those. And I did also want to just give a special shout out to the fact that those emails include resources such as the SOGI Inclusive Education Resource Guide, And that one shares strategies on how to implement and support SOGI inclusive education efforts. So I think that that is something that's very prescient right now. It might be worthwhile to look through and see what resources are available, as well as a lot of resources from FNESC and the Assembly of First Nations regarding reconciliation and other things as such. And then I think that's everything I have on the list.
Thank you, Trustee Reed. Are there any questions about the VCSTA report? Seeing none, we will move on to 2.3, which is trustee written reports. So they're in the package if anyone wants to look at those. We are now on to number 3, public participation. Comments or questions concerning the agenda. I do just have a thing about the norms for public participation, which I'll read out today since there's new people in the audience who haven't necessarily been here before. The public board meeting is the formally designated means of transacting board business. 2 public participation periods are provided as a means for ensuring that community members who are present in the audience have an opportunity to provide comments and or ask questions about business or issues pertaining to the board agenda. There are 2 public participation periods with an allotted time of 15 minutes each. Speakers will be limited to a total of 2 minutes each. Speakers must state their full name, relation to the district, and which agenda item they're speaking to. Matters currently under negotiation or litigation or related to personnel or student circumstances, including names or specific classrooms, are not permitted and will not be addressed in the public participation periods. When requests or questions are directed to the board, actions or answers to many questions may be deferred pending board consideration, because we haven't had a chance to talk about it, and I can't just speak on behalf of the board without a conversation. The chair may indicate another means of response if the question cannot be answered at the time, for example, for operational items. Community members who have other comments or questions are encouraged to contact trustees, board@sd33.bc.ca, or the superintendent via email. Speakers must be timely and courteous. The chair will advise speakers if they consider in this case, consider the content to be discourteous or not aligned with the agenda. Okay, all that being said, anybody who would like to come to the podium and ask a question is free to do so. So you have to press your button, right-hand button.
Okay. My name is Linda D'Armani, and I wanted to thank God and God alone for this land and for our freedoms.
Sorry,
and may
this
He
is
bless
not-
this meeting.
Sorry, excuse me?
Pardon me?
Sorry,
May
are
He
you
bless this
gonna-
meeting with light and truth. Amen.
Thank you. That's fine.
The speaker did not state her relationship.
Sorry, what was your relation to the district?
I live here in this district, and I have worked for the district.
Thank you.
Yes. And it was on the agenda because you guys made comments about unceded territory, and I think that it's God's territory, and I have
Oh, okay, so yeah, we're not gonna do that. That's discrimination. Thanks. Sit down, please. Thank you.
All right. Well,
Sit down, please. Yeah.
I want to ask, since there is so much controversy about the SOGI resources.
Sit down, please. Sit down, please. I will adjourn this. I will take a recess of this meeting
I'm
if you don't
asking a
sit down.
question.
It's not on the agenda.
She just spoke
It
about
is
it.
not on the agenda.
spoke
You can
about
sit
it.
down or I will call a recess, please. Thank you.
Call a
Sit down.
recess then. Why can't I speak? She.
You can sit down. Okay, I am going to call a 5-minute recess because the speaker will not listen to the chair. Thank you. about 2 minutes, so there's 13 minutes left of public participation. I want to remind you that we're talking about agenda items. SOGI 123 is not on the agenda. I will not entertain a single question, either for or against SOGI 123. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Katie Bartel. I'm the DPAC chair and a parent in this district. Speaking to the repeal of the staff conflict of interest policy that's on the agenda and to the admin procedure that is drafted and is replacing it. Sorry. We already have a collective agreement that limits the EA's ability to work full-time and earn a living wage. We have staffing issues that limit our ability to even hire EAs and funding issues that limits our ability to equitably and inclusively support students adequately. And now I'm reading a proposed admin procedure that limits a family's ability to hire an EA to work with their child as a tutor, behavior interventionist, rec therapist, or a respite care provider, just to name a few. It says employees are not permitted to tutor or provide other private professional services for students unless they conform to a few of the things that are also limiting in the guideline. I won't read it all. This should be very concerning to the board, as it could potentially debilitate families from hiring the only trusted adults able and willing to work with their child. What is the benefit to the board not maintaining oversight on this issue?
Thank you for your question. Can I just clarify, just before I'm going to throw that to the superintendent. Superintendent, I know that, like, for example, I had a BI who worked with my son who was an EA in the district, but was not at the same school as my son. So is that still allowed under the new policy, or is this a change what's in the admin procedure, or is it what it's always been? I just don't know the answer to that.
Go ahead, Rachel.
Thank you. So those portions of the admin procedure are actually not new. Those have always been in there. And the determination has always been under the superintendent's role to determine if a conflict of interest could be allowed or not. So, yeah.
So I looked for the old admin procedure before because I just did it this afternoon and I couldn't find it on there anywhere. But if that is true, then the wording needs to change, because from that wording, it really is very limiting. And like even BI, rec therapist, respite, any of those things, if they're not at the same site, it inhibits them from actually working with the same child they support, which in some cases for some families are the only support they have.
Can you speak to that, Superintendent?
Sorry.
Just pass that to the Assistant Director of HR.
This one is a bit tricky. Like, we have always had that in the admin procedure. And the reason for that is because that person is holding a position as an employee of the district, as well as then if they're taking on professional services. So yeah, we can take it back and look at it. Yeah. 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 Can I say something?
A trustee Bondar?
To just add to the question, it strikes me as something that might need to be looked at on a case-by-case basis. Is that how it is handled?
Yeah, there's nothing within the admin procedure. So to apply for a determination, we could assess it and on a case-by-case basis still determine that we would allow that scenario to happen within the district. Yeah.
Trustee Prosay, do you have a question?
Yeah, just to speak to that, I do think that it does say there, though, that engaging in activities outside of regular employment duties and then et cetera, that promotes the employee's business or an organization which the employee has a financial interest, or that of a financial member, partner, business associate. I think it's to protect the school district from the other people using it for their own personal gain. It's not for those that help the students in the district.
So I just need to, I need to step in as chair. Sorry, trustees, we're not all answering these questions. This is a question from, I asked some follow-up because I want to make sure I understood the question so that staff could answer it. It's not really during public participation the chance for all the trustees to chime in. Sorry, you can say all that when we're discussing the repeal of the thing later on, yeah. Cracking down. Right, I'm not seeing any more questions from the audience. So we are going to move on to action items. 4.1 is capital plan bylaw number 2023-2024. and CP on all the letters there. Secretary Treasurer.
So, oh, sorry, I've got to scroll down here. Yeah, it is a confusing thing. It's basically what we're doing is a provincial notice here. This is the board giving the district approval to spend some money that the province has approved giving us. And the money is for purchase of a truck and a kettle, a large bowl type cooking implement.
So just to clarify for
Yeah.
trustees, you have already gotten our permission to ask for these things. Now we've gotten the money and now you're asking
Yes.
us permission to spend it.
Yes.
Is that correct?
So, I should probably go back because I know Trustee Swanky was asking me earlier in the evening. In June, we brought you a resolution that we could ask the ministry for this funding. So that was a resolution then. Now they've awarded the money to us, but we need your permission to add it to the budget essentially so that we can spend it.
Trustee Bondar?
Could I just
Oh,
clarify?
sorry, Secretary Treasurer, you need to push your button.
Thank you. Could I just clarify on our recommendation, you do have that we approve readings for October 19th. Is that just a typo?
That is a typo.
Thank
yes.
you.
Trustee Swanky.
Would the chair entertain the motion?
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. I would move first that the board approve 3 readings of capital plan bylaw number 2324 CPSD 33-02 at the October 10th, 2022 regular meeting of the board.
Do I have a seconder? Trustee. Sorry. Trustee Swanky, do you want to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Chair. Speaking strictly to the merits of conducting all 3 readings this evening, this is money that's been approved by the ministry. Passing the bylaw tonight releases those funds so they can be spent. And if you review the report, there is a deadline for these dollars to be spent. So there's no value in waiting to finish these 3 readings at the November board meeting. It would delay the work of staff and basically allocating these dollars to benefit the district. So.
Okay, thank you very much. And just to clarify for trustees, it's because it's a bylaw, you need to do 3 readings of a bylaw, so we need to pass this first, otherwise we have to do it on 3 different days. Trustee Moss?
Thank you. So this is new yes, and so I'm looking here where it says, the board should forthwith adopt a bylaw, further down. After that bylaw is adopted, so this enables us to, or this makes the local council obliged to collect per dwelling funds from developers?
Sorry,
That's
what
what
are
I've
you
got here.
talking about?
Well, that's what I've got here on this document.
It's just we're talking about the bylaw, we're doing.
Yes.
But what we're speaking to is whether we're doing 3 readings tonight, so I'm not
Well,
sure.
I know,
what
but
you-
I had a question that I wanted to ask, and you got to the, and now we're speaking to the 3 readings, right? So I'd like to have my question answered before.
Okay, I'm just very confused how it's germane, but that's,
Okay, so it says page 6 of 6. And this seems to be part of it's speaking to the, yeah, it says, so my question is, I don't understand how a bylaw that we write makes the municipal council obliged to collect dwellings, like, have we done that before?
I'm just scrolling through.
Okay, you see where I am?
yeah.
So you're actually in a letter from the ministry, which is about every type of. Oh, sorry. Shall I repeat myself? So what you're looking at is a letter from the ministry, which covers every single type of capital funding that the ministry gives us. So it includes, building envelope. It includes major capital, includes minor capital, includes the new school infrastructure program. It includes property acquisition, site acquisition. So it's kind of a shopping list of everything we could be spending capital money on. So what we're approving tonight is one tiny component of this. If you're reading further down about acquisition of site, which I think is what you are referring to, then yes, that would be something that you would do if you're doing a bylaw about that, but we're not. We're actually just doing it about that component that's highlighted. So if you look at page 1, it's not actually numbered, but it's the one with the British Columbia insignia on it.
Yeah.
There's a bulleted list of about a dozen items, and only one of them is bolded. And that's the one that the resolution is about tonight.
Trustee Muzz, you have a follow-up?
I'm sorry, point of privilege. I actually can't hear.
Okay.
I'm hard of hearing. I didn't hear everything that you said with the background noise, and just because we're approving, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I could probably hear you just fine. I don't know. If we're approving all 3 readings.
This would be a part of personal privilege. Do you want to take a? Yeah, that's fine. So I will hear your privilege. It is fairly noisy. I don't know, Superintendent, are you in communication with?
Yeah, they're actually monitoring what's happening.
Okay,
Just because it's financials, I have a hard time just saying yes if I can't hear every point, and I did have a similar question.
do you feel that if we speak up loud that we would be able to keep conducting the meeting, or would you rather we called a recess? Because we can all talk much louder, I'm sure, than we have been. So like I can project. If we all projected, we might be able to work it out. Sorry, you can need to press your button.
Yeah, I think that should maybe just call it to attention so that we be sure to project. I just want to be careful with financials. If you could, just the last little thing that you said there. Yeah. Thank you.
I'll bring it closer too. Okay, all right. So Trustee Mars was referring to the attached letter that we received from the ministry, and this letter includes a summary of every single type of capital that the district can receive, and we don't receive them all, but actually we've received many of them. The school site acquisition fund is something that comes along when you're doing a site acquisition program, which we are not doing tonight. If you look at that letter, the first page with the insignia on it, doesn't actually have a page number on it, you'll see a bulleted list of all the types of capital that are funded, seismic, expansion, replacement. Only one of them is highlighted, and that's the school food infrastructure program. So that's why I attached this letter, because it gives more information. It actually gives the provincial information on what we're asking you to approve tonight. There's a lot of extraneous information in this letter, but that's what we're about tonight.
Trustee Moss, did you have a follow-up still?
Well, no, I just wanted to say thank you for that explanation, because I thought this was something new that we were having to adopt a bylaw in order to collect the fees from developers. And I thought, whoa, if that's what we need, then we better do it quick, right? So, okay, thank you for the explanation. At least you know we read our packages, right?
Yes, go ahead.
Just one piece of information. We do actually collect those fees.
Yes.
And once in a while, we do have to change the rate, but no, not something we're doing today.
So, trustees, just so that we're all clear, because it's noisy outside, quite disruptive, and also we had an interruption there. So we are right now, the motion is on the floor that we are to do all 3 readings tonight. So all we're passing is whether we're doing all 3 readings. Then we actually do the approval of the thing after. So this is just whether we can do it all tonight or if we want to spread it out over more than one night. Does anyone want to speak to that? Trustee Reed.
I think I should just express that I had my answer answered, so I don't have any reservations. Thank you. So I speak for it.
Okay, not saying any other comments. All those in favor that the board approve 3 readings of capital project bylaw number as on the screen at tonight's meeting. That's unanimous, so that passes, that carries, trustees. So then we are on to, if someone can actually make the motion, it would be that the board approve first, second, and third reading. Someone wants to make that. Trustee Bondar.
Sure. I will move that the board approve, we're just doing the first, yeah? First, second, and third readings of capital project bylaw number 2023-24, CPSD 33-02 attached.
Seconded by Trustee Westerby. Trustee Bonner, do you want to speak to that motion?
I do not. Thank you.
Does any, you can push button. Does anyone else wish to speak to the motion? Trustee Swanky.
Thank you, Chair. Through the chair to staff. So the bylaw allows for the allocation of funds to purchase kitchen equipment at CSS, and then a delivery vehicle to service a whole number of schools. I'm just wondering, like, how long does it take to get those services in place, given that we're currently funded to be delivering food to schools?
Thank you. Good question. We're in the process of building a program. So at the moment, there are delivery vehicles for the food that we are delivering, and then we're going to be ramping the program up over the course of the year. So, I think hopefully it'll come at a reasonable time. It does take a long time to get a truck, right? You order them, they come sometimes up to a year later. And in terms of cooking, we're okay for the moment. It would be preferable, so we'll go out and get those kettles as quickly as we can.
Okay, not seeing any further questions or comments. All those in favor that the board approve first, second, and third reading of the capital project bylaw that has just been presented. That's unanimous. That motion carries. Okay, so we are moving on to 4.2, policy renovation project policies to be reaffirmed. 4.2.1 is policy 550, employee recognition. Superintendent, you want to speak to this?
Yep, thank you. So this is part of the ongoing work with the policy review. We've got some policies for today's meeting as well as some for the November meeting. And as you can see, if you go on our public website, you should be able to see all the policies that have been repealed as well as the policies that have been reaffirmed. That information will be up on the public site for a while, and I'll also bring back a summary report at the next public meeting so we can connect all the dots. So that's it. So the very first policy what we have is employee recognition. This basically is going to be its reaffirmation of the policy. And actually Lisa Champagne, who takes time to be able to organize the events, especially the whole notion of the years of service event as well as retiring employees event. We've gone back and reviewed the policy as well as revised the admin procedure. It's in front of you. Just really summary, in the last many years, we've had a backlog of employees to be recognized because of COVID years. But moving ahead, the notion is to try and combine both events into one to be able to maximize the resource allocation. We're still going to have two distinct functions within one, and that's reflected in here, and it's up for your consideration. Thank you.
Okay, does anyone have any questions before we put the motion on the table? Trustee Swank.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question about kind of the role of policy in recognition from the board. So I appreciate that this is articulating, acknowledging something that's been practiced and kind of reaffirming it and adding some depth to that. What I'm wondering about is other recognition by the board that isn't acknowledged in policy, like the athletics recognition that to my recollection was hosted by the Board of Education. So I was just wondering if you could distinguish between this recognition being embedded in policy versus other recognition by the Board of Education.
Thank you, Trustee Swanky. Great question. This is around especially employees. This is more specific on retirements and long service. We have other functions in our school district that are ad hoc celebrations done through by employees. And again, almost all the time, we always recognize that as a board contribution. It doesn't have to be in policy. These are the two formal events with our employees that we must recognize. We've done that in the past. We want to continue doing that notion.
Trustee Moss?
So, excuse me, so just so I'm clear, this is a fundamental change of the way we've been doing it. This is now combining the two events into one, and right?
That's correct. That's correct. That's correct.
Did you have anything else, Trustee Moss? That was it. Okay. I thought you said another thing. Okay. So does anyone else have anything before we put the motion on the table? Okay. Can someone make the motion, please? Trustee Bond.
I move that the Board of Education reaffirm policy 550, employee recognition, formerly 426, employee recognition, as presented.
To a seconder. Trustee Westerby. Trustee Bondar, would you like to speak to your motion?
I actually would. I know that in the past several years, it has been a little bit difficult to play catch up with all of the people who've either retired or done long service. And so I'm glad we're caught up, and I think it will be really nice to be able to combine these two events instead of having two separate ones. So yeah, thank you.
Anyone else? I just want to briefly speak to the motion as well. I think as we get, now that we are cut off and there's fewer people each year, I kind of think it seems more celebratory to have a bigger gathering. So I think it also justifies, like, you know, having a venue that's a bit nicer. If you have more people, if it gets down to being only 10 or 12 people, you have to, you know, it doesn't really make sense to rent out somewhere fancy. So this is, I think it's nice. I think it's a good idea, good use of money, and still recognizing both groups. Trustee Moss.
Okay, I do have one more question. So in the past, we have given each retiring employee a clock or a watch. And so we are discontinuing that. We are just giving them a Visa card with no greater than $250. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Just a point, if I may, Chair, clarification.
Yes.
Apologies to my colleagues, I didn't press my button. Does the admin procedure not indicate that it's a gift no greater than that amount? It doesn't fix what that recognition will actually be. Am I correct in that understanding?
Superintendent.
That is correct, but in the last many years, it has been a gift card.
Trustee Moss, did you have something?
Well, I guess I'm just concerned that this is very prescriptive. Even so, the policy says a reception. Well, what if we want to have a dance? Well, what if we want to have a tea? What if we want to have an afternoon event? Like, I mean, it's silly, but I hate locking us into something so prescriptive. So it has to be a reception because we say in the policy it's a reception. And then okay, well, I'm not going to carry on. That's all.
Okay, not seeing any further. Oh, Trustee Swanky, did you have something?
Sure, thank you. I do hear and I appreciate the comments of my colleague. I think what I'd say is if there were considerations that staff wanted to bring to the board to support further recognition of employees, they can do so and we would update the policy accordingly. What I did just want to highlight about this is, there's been conversations about district culture, and this is one of the few measures that the board can take to support a positive culture that celebrates its learning and its working in the school district. So I think it's a good policy. I think this is what we should be doing, and it embeds current practice into a policy that'll support for the years to come.
All right, not seeing any other questions or comments from trustees. All those in favor that the Board of Education reaffirm policy 550, employee recognition, as presented. That's unanimous. The motion carries. Okay, we're on to policy renovation project. This is policies to be repealed. There are 5 policies.
Right, that's correct.
So anyways, I was going to, with the board's permission, do what I did last time, which is if there is a policy that anyone would really like to discuss separately, we can put that one aside. And then if there are other ones that people feel confident doing as one motion, we could repeal several at once. So if anyone is opposed to that, speak now and we can do them all individually. I have no problem with that, but Trustee Wester.
Sorry, I'm not necessarily opposed, but I would if we would entertain just having a summary of each one so that we know what it is, so that the public knows what it is we're appealing.
I'm also fine with doing it. Honestly, if I just get everyone going, I'd rather do them separately, we can just do them separately. It's fine.
I would rather do them separately.
That is not a problem with me. I just thought if everyone's like, let's repeal them all, then we don't need to do it separately. But I'm fine with doing them separately. It's good practice, anyways. We get to discuss each one separately. All right, so then we will do 4.3.1, which is policy 307, supervision of and evaluation of principals and vice principals. Superintendent.
It's over to Assistant Director Rachel Green, but really quickly, as we come up to when we come to the next policy, we've taken some feedback from the members of the public. We can amend the admin procedure based on the feedback and also bring it back next time. Thank you.
Okay, so we have for your consideration a recommendation that the board repeal policy 307, supervision and evaluation of principals and vice principals. It is operational in nature, and we have also updated our admin procedure to be a really robust framework for the leadership development and performance appraisal of PBP.
Does anybody have a question before we put the motion on the table? Trustee Wester.
Yeah, I just think that it is important for the board to expect evaluations as it is operational in nature, but I'm wondering if there's any policies or anywhere you can point that staff could point to that speaks to the board's expectations of receiving evaluations ongoing.
Superintendent?
No, but I think it goes right back to the policy regarding the board relationship between the superintendent and the Board of Education and the expectations of operation of the school district. The board can always request information via the superintendent, and that perhaps is embedded within the main policy. Hope that helps you.
Trustee Moss? Okay, Trustee Bonner, yes, please make the motion.
I will move that the Board of Education repeal policy 307, supervision and evaluation of principals and vice principals.
Seconded by Trustee Reed. Trustee Bondar, would you like to speak to the motion?
I will just briefly state that it makes a lot of sense to me, and everything that our HR supervisor, Rachel Green, has said makes a lot of sense. Thank you for your hard work.
Trustee Moss?
So this actually goes back to a previous conversation that we had. And I think, a policy like this gives the public confidence with an expectation that the board has an expectation of the contracts that we sign. And so I think I think that this needs to be a public board declaration of, hey, public, we're doing this, just so you know, we're on top of it. It doesn't have to be as long and lengthy as this, but I think that we really need to have something in place for the public to know, to be able to go and look. The admin reg is very lengthy and thorough, and that's great. But I think a policy like this, I think it needs to stay in place.
Superintendent?
I can answer the question. So if I'm going to refer you back to policy 141, role of the superintendent. So at the end of the day, the whole mandate work around the policy manual was to look at the policies that were redundant. And if there's responsibility assigned to the school superintendent, that's under the governance norm. And so if I can read you point number 2, right? Ensures that the board is fully informed of the operations of the school system and provides information reports as the board requires. So there's nothing stopping the board requiring the school superintendent information around evaluation processes in our system. That's under policy 141. So I find this policy will be redundant. And so again, I'm going to remind the Board of Education why we have gone through the policy analysis to be able to remove redundant policies as per our policy manual. And so and I want to reassure the board, again, it's under the board's purview. Within policy 141, you can request any information report with the school superintendent, governance operations.
So I think we've heard the superintendent's rationale. I do want to just say at this point, we're not gonna let you keep speaking to the motion, Superintendent. So this is up to the board to decide. So the board needs to be debating the motion. We have heard the rationale though. That's why this is on the thing. The superintendent was tasked with doing the policy renovation project. Now the board needs to think about whether we agree with what the superintendent has said. So trustee Ma's raised a point. So anyone else who wants to speak to this can also. Trustee Westerby is next, and then you, trustee Prose, because trustee Westerby had his hand up first.
Thank you. Yeah, I will speak in favor of the repeal. Simply by the nature of the first line, the superintendent shall be responsible for developing and implementing. That's laid out already in policy 141, responsibilities of the superintendent, which thereby makes the remainder of this policy redundant. So if we were, as I believe in, having a value of evaluation, I believe that would have to be a separate policy that I would have to then introduce separately, because that it's not what I would imagine the values of us that I would like to see. It's not here, so this is not a policy that I would want to keep as is. I'm happy to see the admin reg the way it is. That actually makes a lot of sense. And anything else I would be doing separately, not through here. So that's why I speak in favor of the repeal.
Trustee Prose.
I would speak in favor of repealing this policy for the simple, maybe I'm an echo chamber here, but for the fact that policy 307 does say supervision and evaluation of principals and vice principals. That is not the purview of the board.
Okay, not seeing, oh, sorry, trustee Swanky, sorry.
If I may, Chair, it's a question to you regarding whether a proposed comment is in order. Regardless of the repeal of the policy, the administrative regulation remains in place. So my question to the Chair is now an appropriate time to provide feedback on the administrative regulation as a member of the board?
I think it would be, because I think that the superintendent is now listening to us discuss the repeal, and so if there was any points brought up that the board felt were maybe things to keep in mind with I think that would be a okay time to bring it up.
If I may then share the two reflections I had preparing for a meeting today. One was the leadership development and performance appraisal of all leaders throughout the district, not just PVP. The second thought was perhaps embedding within the administrative procedure a report to be presented to the board annually in camera that breaks down that performance reviews were I want to say performed, but conducted throughout the district, that this was some of the takeaways from the process. And if anything has changed year over year, either in the process or the outcome of that process, that it's highlighted to the Board of Education in that venue.
Yeah, I was actually going to, based on what trustee Westerby had also said as well, if there was some mechanism to, not to report on individual administrators, but basically on the process. And like we did evaluations on 5 administrators and they're all, that kind of thing, just to keep the board informed that those things are ongoing. I think that would help us when we do the superintendent's evaluation as well, to just know that like a task that's been delegated is being done, so.
Yeah.
Superintendent?
That's great feedback. And so, ongoing feedback. Definitely take that into consideration, and we can actually add that to the admin procedure. And I really believe, and I think part of the board's work is to be able to understand and be able to look at regulations also being implemented, admin procedures, and having some way of having communication back to understand that the district is being the operations piece being looked after by the superintendent and the 3 assistant school superintendents. So yeah.
I'm so sorry. I need a point of privilege.
Yeah.
I gotta pee.
Oh, okay. Sorry, even though we haven't had the vote, we're gonna take a 5-minute recess. Yeah, 5 minutes. I'm, trustees, I'm gonna call this meeting back to order. Okay, so, trustees, I've called the meeting back to order.
Hi, thank you.
So, now that we're back to order, so I am going to remind us we're discussing repealing the supervision evaluation of principals and vice principals motion. I believe we'd all spoken. Is there anyone else who did not get a chance to speak or wants to speak? Okay, seeing no one. All those in favor that the Board of Education repeal policy 307, supervision and evaluation of principals and vice principals. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you, trustees. All right, so we are moving on to 4.3.2, policy 401, staff conflict of interest. This is still for repeal. Superintendent.
I'm going to punt this over to Assistant Director Rachel Green, but I think, as I said prior to, and I'll bring to Rachel, we can actually make the changes. I think the changes that were recommended during the last question period, providing more clarity, will be really beneficial. And so realistically, we can actually go ahead and look at making determinations based on interests of students under the tutoring part, and we can actually make those changes to the admin procedures and have that posted by Friday. Thank you.
Okay, so we are recommending that we repeal policy 401, staff conflict of interest. The reason being that we feel with the updated administrative procedure, the policy is made redundant. In addition, it does dictate the expectations for all district staff. So because of that, it is quite operational in nature, outlining those expectations similar to the code of conduct policy that we had repealed for the same reason.
Thank you. Any questions? Oh, Trustee West.
Thank you. I just want to clarify some of the questions that were raised at the question period and some of the exchanges that were happened afterwards. Just can the superintendent or staff speak to the limitations? I know it was kind of briefly brushed on of families hiring within that structure for their own interventions. And if I believe it was already touched upon as well that this isn't really actually altering anything at all. Like this is going to carry on what we already do. But I just want to make it clear about the amendments that was kind of mentioned as well, just if that can all be clarified.
Sorry. There you go. Thanks. And I think looking at part of the regs talks about engaging in activities outside of regular employees' duties, and even looking at something such as supporting, tutoring students or supporting students by itself. I think the way the regulation is written, it's pretty structured, and I think we need to be able to look at individual student situations, and I think that's where the question came into play, and how do we put that into the admin procedure? So.
Can I just clarify, you're not necessarily saying it would be a free-for-all with employees working for individual families, but you would write the regulation to more explain that there would be potential exceptions or whatever. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
I think what we were thinking is we do have the section in the administrative procedure around the tutoring or providing other private professional services, which has always been in the AP. What we would look to point people to is there is the ability to seek a determination on a case-by-case basis for those kinds of situations that arise. And that piece as well has always been in the admin procedure around the superintendent or designate will evaluate if will evaluate the disclosure and if there is a conflict or potential conflict, determine if an exception can be granted with appropriate measures in place to manage the conflict or potential conflict. The concern being that we always need to know about these situations. We can't just let them be happening without us being aware of them, because we do need to mitigate some risk, and it's also protection for our employees as well with those professional boundaries pieces. So just ensuring that we're aware of it, and then we've assessed it on a case-by-case basis and we're comfortable with making that determination.
Thank you. Trustee Westerby?
Sorry, just a point of clarification. Does the current administrative procedure as presented here, it is an unaltered version of what is existing and we're simply repealing the policy, or is it a new admin procedure, sorry.
Sorry, do you want to speak to that, Superintendent?
Yep, it is. So we took the existing admin procedure and added to it and clarified it quite a bit. We found there were some pieces missing as well in the process that we had, and then we had it reviewed by legal counsel just to make sure that we had covered all our bases.
So just to clarify for trustees, the admin procedures, the board doesn't actually pass, but we're being presented with the admin procedure so that we know that if we repeal the policy, it's not like there's nothing in place. So the superintendent and the HR supervisor can go and make changes to the administrative procedure without bringing it back to the board, is what they're saying. So just to clarify that. So, would anyone like to put the motion on the table, and then we can discuss whether we believe that repealing this policy is, I think you've heard the rationale from the HR supervisor and from the superintendent, so if someone could make the motion, then we can discuss it. Trustee Bond.
I move that the Board of Education repeal policy 401, staff conflict of interest.
Is there a seconder? Trustee Bondor, do you want to speak?
I think that Assistant Director Green clearly outlined that the new-ish admin procedure contains details and specific instructions that it did not before, that are ultimately for the protection of everyone and for cases where there may be individuals that require additional services. Those can be dealt with on a case-by-case basis. It makes a lot of sense to me, and once again, I'm thankful for your hard work on this.
Trustee Moss?
Thank you. So first of all, I want to say unequivocally that my objection is in no way, shape, or form part of the good work that our Human Resources Director is doing, or the superintendent. However, I'm going to say that this policy actually does what it says it does. And in the second to last line in the policy is, the board has an obligation to maintain the public's trust and confidence. And that's why this policy is in the policy book. Especially conflict of interest. It can get sketchy, it can get tricky. And so, for that, it's good that we have this admin reg and glad that it's been tightened up. But this policy absolutely needs to be there for exactly the reasons it says, public's trust and confidence.
I had a question I realized I forgot to ask when we were just doing questions, so I'll ask it now. Does this policy apply to trustees as well? I know trustees are not employees of the board, but, say I'm an artist, say a school is like, they're gonna do a logo, I wouldn't do this, but could I apply to be the artist who gets commissioned? Because that seems like that would be a conflict of interest to me, so I wouldn't do it. But, it seems like it would be a conflict of interest for employees, so I'm trying to figure out if that is, this applies to us, or if we're just separate and we're off in our code of conduct with conflict of interest.
So for the trustees, you gotta look to the School Act.
Okay. Trustee Wester.
Thank you. Just hearing some of the feedback from the members, I appreciate that the board does have an obligation to maintain the public's trust and confidence. This policy currently is like a big blanket statement that ultimately prohibits some of the wiggle room that we actually need to provide for a community, because of, as was brought up by some of the comments from the gallery, that we are a small community and that some of these people who work in our district are part-time, and sometimes those are the people that work outside of the school as well. So having a blanket policy, as was raised by Assistant Director Green, points out that we do need a more wiggle room in this, and having this policy prevents that from happening. In addition, some of the other pieces, the obligations, the trust, the confidence, the fiduciary duties are actually laid out in other policies. So we are still covered there. and the really important parts that this policy currently states, which are very important. But we do need that wiggle room. So I think this policy right now, I understand the reasoning. And as long as everyone's getting their needs met, I think that it makes sense that this policy be removed. Gosh, thank you.
Anyone else? Oh, Trustee Reed.
Yes, I listened to the information brought forward in the public information session, and I understood what was being communicated, and I have confidence that we would be able to reposition ourselves if we feel needs aren't being met. If we see that there are students that need more, I think that we can be flexible in ways that we need to be, just to make sure that those gaps are filled. So I would speak for the motion, even though I did share those concerns, and maybe something that we keep an eye on.
Trustee Swain.
Thank you, Chair. It's a challenging conversation because on one hand we're considering repeal, but at the same time we're speaking into the administrative regulation. If I may, a question and then a comment. First, I just want to clarify from staff is maintaining the public's trust and confidence. Is that not the fiduciary duty of any employee of the district?
That's correct.
Thank you. To the administrative regulation, if I may, two pieces that I want to flag for consideration. One, it's been highlighted that often these are persons that are reliant on services. If we're talking about respite, behavioral intervention, other therapies, having a commitment to make a determination within 7 days, 14 days, so that plans can be made may be very important. I also, and my position is that this is the culture of the district already, but I know that isn't always shared. I would hope that there is a culture where there's new learning about what the expectations are, and there's forgiveness where mistakes have been made. I really think that needs to be highlighted because I believe that our employers are working in the interest of students, both like in their paid hours and off those hours. And we want a culture where they feel safe to come forward and ask for a determination to be made, which won't impact their ability to go to work the next day.
Can I just one thing just before it's looking like there's not other comments, but so it was sort of not a surprise to me that people weren't allowed to like work for their own students. Like I knew that because I used to work in the district and I've had experiences with my own child. So I'm just wondering though, so I knew that was a thing. So then to hear sort of alarm bells go off was just a little bit of a surprise to me because I didn't know that it could even happen. But can you speak just a tiny bit, HR supervisor, about how, like, what the potential pitfalls are if employees are working directly with the families for pay in addition to their work in the district, just so that trustees can sort of maybe understand why we even have a policy or a procedure about this. Like, just very, you don't have to give us a long report, but just a little spiel maybe.
So from a human resources perspective, it really is all about the fiduciary duty and professional boundaries. So when we see that you are acting as a district employee, but then you're off-duty contact, you're working with those same families to provide professional services, that has the potential to impact the reputation of the district. And then also we see lapses in professional boundaries because of those different relationships that are established. So that's of concern that we want to be able to manage and look at.
Thank you. And then we did establish there are potential exceptions or whatever. Okay. Trustee Moss.
I just would like to just add a comment in conjunction with one of my colleagues' comments, and that is that policies are the ways that we keep an eye on things. That's how we do it. So, and it's also, yes, staff has an obligation to maintain trust and confidence, but they're hired to do that. They're the employees. We are elected and we answer to the community. And so, just something to keep in mind.
Okay, not seeing any further comments. All those in favor that the Board of Education repeal policy 401, staff conflict of interest. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, moving on to 4.3.3, policy 428, expenses. Assistant Director.
Okay, we have up for your consideration policy 428 expenses. So we recommend that this be repealed because it is made redundant by a revised administrative procedure 530 and it is quite operational in nature.
All right, trustees, any questions before we put the motion on the table? Not see. Oh, trustee Smythe.
Just a quick comment, if I may. Current trustee policy governing expenses states that it aligns with the exempt staff rates. However, the administrative regulation doesn't talk about exempt staff rates. It talks about all rates aligning with CRA expectations, with the exception of where collective agreements speak to the matter. So my suggestion is just that at whatever point we are reviewing our governance policy, that we update the language in the trustee expense policy.
Okay, would anyone like to, are we going to ask a question or make a motion? Go ahead.
I will move that the Board of Education repeal policy 428 expenses.
Seconded by trustee Westerby. Would you like to speak to motion?
At this point, no, I once again defer to our excellent assistant director and her work.
All right, would anyone else like to speak to the motion? Trustee Moss.
I'm not going to reiterate what I've said before, which I still believe stands. It's about public confidence that the board is actually overseeing the board as the employer of the school district. This policy that is recommended for repeal says the Board of Education 4 times. The Board of Education expects all employees to use excellent business practices. Excellent. Board of Education recognizes the nature of the duties of some board employees, requiring them to travel. Okay, great. Board of Education supports employee participation in conferences. Excellent. Board of Education delegates authority to the superintendent. There we go. So this comes full circle, closes the loop, gives the public confidence that the board is looking to the school district for good practices and encouraging staff to go and upgrade, to go and do professional development. So we take this away and we say nothing. We're mute. So, and again, all due respect to Rachel Green, this is not about you. This is about the big picture. Thank you.
Trustee Westerby.
Thank you. I would actually, through the chair to staff, could the staff please speak to other policies that are in place that encourage staff to continue on their professional growth? Because I do believe that there are some that exist that say that the board cares about has something to do with professional growth. I'm sure that there's something already that speaks to that.
I'm not sure that there is actually. I don't think that there is necessarily, other than the budget. Like, we obviously approve some spending on professional development. I don't think we have a policy on it. I could be. We have one about trustee professional development, but I don't confess to not having the policy manual memorized. So I I know, bad chair. Secretary Trish.
Just a quick note, I think it's actually written into some of the employee contracts. I certainly know it is for PVP. I'm not quite sure about other groups, but I suspect it is. I'm looking down. Yep, there we go.
Trustee Swing.
Thank you. If I may, Chair, and it's come up a few times tonight, Policy 141 delegates to the superintendent that they ensure professional development opportunities are available to school district employees to ensure excellence, efficacy, and relevance of current educational practices.
Okay, so we support professional development by delegating that to the superintendent. Okay, thank you. Someone does have more of the policies memorized. Okay. Trustee Reed.
I have an appreciation for the board needing to speak into specific aspects of professionality and moral conduct. I think we should repeal this policy because it is operational in nature, but I think that if there are we really make a stand for a lot of these things with our strategic plan. And if people read our strategic plan and they don't see these values reflected, then I think that is where we need to adjust ourselves, because we will never be able to make a policy about every possible thing that could come up in a school district, especially a school district facing the sort of changes that we're seeing in the world. And that strategic plan is really our roadmap, and it is really, it's going to guide us. So I think that we can definitely repeal this policy and still lead with those values.
Trustee Prost.
The policy speaks to expenses, and I think that's all it speaks to, and I think we need to keep that in mind. It just speaks to how we do expenses and how it's paid and how it's related to, and I support this motion to repeal this. Because the administration procedure actually does a better job than the policy.
All right. I'm not seeing anyone else. All right. So all those in favor that the Board of Education repeal policy 428 expenses? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, so we're on to 4.3.4, which is policy 708, emergency closure. Is this again. Oh, you're on the hot seat tonight.
It's me tonight. Okay, we have a policy 708, emergency closure, recommending that we repeal. It is quite procedural in nature. It is made redundant by our revised administrative procedure 470, which outlines all of the procedure behind what needs to occur when an emergency closure happens.
Any questions before we make the motion? Not seeing any. Trustee Bondar, are you going to make the motion?
I move that the Board of Education repeal policy 708, emergency closure.
All right, seconded by Trustee Reed. Oh, you got in there. All right, Trustee Bondar, do you want to speak to your motion?
I will echo a lot of the excellent comments made by my colleague previously in terms of our strategic plan dictating policy, and also our assistant director here. This is operational. This is very clear. This is good. Thank you.
I'm not seeing anyone else. I did want to speak. I mean, it's not so much speaking to this one specifically, but I think this is a good example. When it's something that's very distinctly an operational matter, like the school it's snowed out. I have nothing to do with that. Whether the school is closed, it is not a thing I am dealing with. If a school floods, it's just not something I as a trustee am dealing with. This is very clearly operational in my mind, and I think it makes a lot of sense to repeal it. And I think that the exercise of doing our policy renovation project was to get rid of redundancies, to make the policy manual something that really makes sense. We've actually addressed a lot of the issues that people have raised of like, where would people find these things? Now it's all on the same page. We have policies, we have admin procedures, people can see which things are which. I think it helps clarify the difference between governance and operations as well. When there's something that's obviously operations, we shouldn't have a policy about it. When it's a thing that has both aspects, then we should have a policy about it. And I think this is an example of one that it doesn't have a governance aspect. We're not governing the weather. So I vote in favor of this. All right, so I am not seeing any other comments, I don't believe, unless Trustee Stuckey, yes, are you moving? Were you just going? Okay. All right, so all those in favor that the Board of Education repeal policy 708, emergency closure. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Board Regulation 701. It's 4.3.5 now. Board Regulation 701.2, bus driver medicals.
Last but not least, so we have Board Regulation 701.2, bus driver medicals. This is a policy that is made redundant because it is already embedded in Transport Canada's regulation. You already have to undergo a medical exam before you can apply or renew your Class 2 license. So for us to then ask for additional information is actually not in alignment with FIPA and need to know information.
Trustee Bondar?
I move that the Board of Education repeal policy 701.2, bus driver medicals.
Trustee Westerby seconds. Trustee Bondar, do you want to speak to your motion?
I do not.
Does anyone else wish to speak to this motion? Okay, not seeing anyone. All those in favor that the Board of Education repeal Board Regulation 701.2 bus driver medicals. That's unanimous. Thank you, trustees. Okay, so we've got meeting summaries are in the package. So number 6 is public participation. Comments or questions concerning the agenda. I will remind you of all of the rules as stated previously. We will only be taking questions or comments on the agenda. No topics that are not on the agenda. Okay, not seeing anyone coming to the podium. We will move on to number 7, which is superintendent's update.
Thank you, Board Chair. So I got a bit of a quick mini presentation slides. I can talk that. So first of all, I got 4 updates. As I said, you can always go on our public site the next day and you can find a link to a 2-page report of this information. The same information is provided to the Board of Education in my weekly update. So this is a combination of many things, but for your consideration. So again, thank you to all district staff and members of the Board of Education attending October 6th. It was a phenomenal day for our school district. It was a special day, our journey to truth and reconciliation. This event will have a lasting impact on our district culture and our continued work towards our journey towards truth and reconciliation. We have come a long way as a school district where there were overt racism and discrimination towards Indigenous peoples, to a space where members of the community have truly begun, to understand the gravity of the truth and the lasting harm done to Indigenous people and communities by Canada's residential school program. And I know that last Friday, had a profound impact on all of us sitting there. The day also reinforces our ongoing commitment to nurturing a more profound understanding among all of us as we continue our journey with truth, reconciliation, and healing, and the lasting legacies of colonization and confronting current realities in our system that impact Indigenous students, and including ongoing practices. I do want to mention, these events take a lot of planning, time, and effort, many, many months of planning. That's a wonderful picture of the planning committee. So really co-chairs Paula Gosal and Jenny McCurdy. We had Donna Arnold, Principal, Joanne Britton, Executive Assistant, Shelley Burke, VP, Jamie Charlie, Vice Principal, Beth Clark, Vice Principal, Sarah Gamboa, Principal, Nerine Graham, Indigenous Education Coordinator, Christy Hodgson, Manager of Finance, David Manuel, Assistant Superintendent, Stacey Pickles, Vice Principal, Brenda Point, District Principal, Stanley Van Rye, Vice Principal of Central, and Sean Wicker, District Principal. All of these people spend many months in the back room planning, coordinating, aligning, visioning, and it takes a lot of time. So very grateful for all their work, and it has had a profound impact on all of us. And last but not least, also super grateful to Assistant School Superintendent Paula Jordan for taking on the task of emceeing the event. Paula, thank you for leading us through, really leading through heart, compassion, and humility on this day. Much appreciated. So thank you to the team. Next one is Feeding Futures. We've had, you've known about this, the board knows about this. The Feeding Futures program will address immediate needs of feeding students, and builds on the progress made with the Affordability Fund from last year. The whole idea is the fund is expected to reach 20% of the students who are facing food insecurities across the province, and again, looking at our particular school district. So we are looking to continue offering food programs that are already in place for breakfast and lunch. The additional funding will be used to ensure more consistent breakfast is offered for students based on needs across the schools in our school district. Top 3 priorities for us from now till December 2023. Expand and enhance our lunch offerings through a partnership with Chilliwack Bowls of Hope. Right now, approximately they offer close to 1,200 soup bowls every single day, and hopefully we're going to expand on that and improve. Next one is identify and evaluate current breakfast programs at all sites across the school district. That's ongoing work, lots of survey. That's secondary. And then the third one is ensuring schools are following healthy food and safe food standards outlined in the school meal and school nutrition program handbook. So 3 priorities for consideration. This question has come up. Why can't we spend leftover dollars from the Affordability Fund? Because the ministry has very clear guidelines. Simple as that. Really quickly, last year, we got $1.5 million from the Affordability Fund. We provided $248,000 to community organizations. And then approximately $648,000 was spent by schools on food, school fees, and supplies. Leftover dollars was $455. The ministry is very clear, and that this information they're looking at, you can only spend that money on school supplies. And again, Dr. Simon Sangster will have to provide reports back to the ministry. So there's a differentiation. So if you have any questions that show up on Facebook, social media pages, please make sure that we're consistent with our messaging, then there's clarity. Next one, thank you, Dr. Savage, Foundation Skills Assessment. So I have some dates. So FSA runs in our schools from October 2nd to November 10th. FSA shows parents and students and teachers how students are doing in literacy and numeracy. Participation is mandatory. Where do I get this from? The Deputy Minister's letter will be a link to my presentation. So if we go to the next one, so those are the three things. There's one. So as a reminder, the authority of the Minister of Education and Childcare to make orders requiring boards of education to participate in large-scale assessments to set out in Section 168 of the School Act. That is part and requirements set by the Minister of Education. So the Student Learning Assessment Order requires boards and district staff to ensure the assessments are administered and information collected according to the Minister's instructions. And then school principals can only exempt students from writing the FSA in limited circumstances, including a family emergency, a lengthy illness, or other extenuating circumstances which would prevent a student from writing the assessment. So that information is there for your consideration. And then on page 6 of the FSA manual, Dr. Savage, next page, if you just go to the next one, please. Yeah, and if you can see, the exceptions are there. You can look through that. Again, there's no. So the first one is students whose personalized learning standards significantly differ from provincial curricular standards. Next one is students identified and funded as ELL students who have not reached a level of proficiency sufficient to provide meaningful responses to the literacy or numeracy sections of the FSA. Thirdly, students who have previously written the FSA. And the fourth one is experiencing extenuating circumstances, a family emergency, or lengthy illness. And again, that's a relationship between the school principal, vice principal, and families. And finally, thank you. Just want to remind about the importance of the FSA for the public. On November 18th, 2021, the First Nations Leadership Council wrote a letter to the Minister of Education strongly supporting the Foundation Skills Assessment and the importance of the FSA, and recognizing that literacy and numeracy results are important indicators of the educational success of First Nation learners and are informed by legal commitments and obligations to meet the objectives of the United Nations Declarations on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples required under the Declarations of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act. And so that letter was distributed among all partner groups, and that is what the Ministry of Education is also using to support. And so the last one, I think, just summarizes there. This is really our work towards a commitment to reconciliation to make sure that we have provides important line of sight into the learning trajectories of Indigenous students and other student groups within our school system. So as to the FSA and the importance of the FSA, I want to connect the dots. And thank you. The last one, Dr. Savage. Enrollment analysis is the fun part. I want to make it super simple. Let's go to the slide. There we go. I realized from our last summary how there were a lot more curiosity questions. So 14,983.7 is the number that we projected and Dr. Sangster built the budget on, right? Great. And total FTE as of September 30th is 15,341.25. And so the increase is 357.55. I do want to let you know, again, we need qualified staff to do all the legwork. Nikki Weens is our Systems Information Data Manager. She plays a pivotal role in overseeing and reconciling all of the school enrollment records. We have an electronic system. She goes through every single detail and makes sure every single student has the correct number of courses. And so I have to really commend her work, and she also is now recognized across the province for a level of expertise, and so we are fortunate to have her here. She makes all of our lives so much easier. We keep bugging her for reports continuously, and she spits out the reports, so Next time you see her, thank her for the work she does. Good news story for us. Last slide, I think, is it? No, that's basically it. My apologies. There we go. That just talks about our growth rate. I thought that could be a fun slide for you to look at. We continue to grow rapidly, and again, except for the occasional dip, again, as you can see, head count this year was 14,530. One last piece for consideration. Between now and October 22nd, the ministry goes across all 60 school districts to make sure kids are not double counted. And those districts that may have counted kids twice, they'll send us a nice polite note to let us know that they are reducing our FTE by 15 FTE. So just want to let you know that even though I gave you the final numbers, that could look different on the actual reports. But the good news story is we're increasing. Thank you.
Superintendent, can I just clarify with the number, the first slide that you showed us there, the one, yeah. So there's 357 more kids than we budgeted for, but we had already budgeted for an increase, correct? So we're actually up more than that. Like that's not the. Do you know what the?
That is correct.
What was our increase that we had
About
budgeted
250, I think, off the top of my head.
I was going to say 2.6% because I'm remembering it in percents, but that would be just over 300, I think.
So we're up over 600 kids, is what you're saying, which is a huge increase. Like that's one of the biggest that we've had.
That is, but actually, this is, if you look at the number there, that's FTE, full-time equivalent. So like the number of coastal students take. I head count, I have to go back and look. It is a number. I think it's.
That's where my 2.6.
Yeah. Head count's different from that total,
Yeah.
but our FTE has increased tremendously. That's correct.
All right, trustees, any questions about that? What we just heard? Oh, Trustee Bondar.
Well, oh, do you want to push a button? Not a comment so much as just I want to reiterate. I think that I thank you for this report, and when you mentioned number 1 and number 3. So number 1 was a discussion about our incredible Per D Day that happened last Friday, and I will echo your sentiments. We are leading the country as a district in terms of our efforts towards reconciliation across our entire district. This day is also quite related to number 3 that you brought up, which is the FSA and FNESC, the First Nations Council, as well as the United Nations, has made recommendations that we must follow through with. So the FSA is actually advantageous in terms of data collection for First Nations students. And that is what we really need to keep in mind. And I'm really glad that you reiterated that this evening, because we would be remiss to not stress the importance of the FSA because of the role that it is playing in reconciliation. Thank you.
Swanky.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question, if I may, related to the final item in enrollment. Not a question I'm anticipating can be answered this evening. Trying to understand the strain that growth has placed on our facilities. Do we know approximately how many students are not attending their catchment school out of necessity in order to ensure that we're complying with class size composition and the growth? So I don't know if I'm clear in the question, but Promontory is like one example. We used to have the overflow from one school to the next. How many of those kids are not in their catchment school, not by their own choice?
That's a great question. I don't have that information. We can easily get that for you for consideration. What I know for sure is that we have a large number of kids that are looking for choice to attend elsewhere. We do a great job making sure we can find spaces for those students, but I'll provide that update through one of my weekend updates for consideration.
If I could ask that supplementing that information would be identifying the capacity for our sites and then the enrollment as it currently sits, just to understand, like, maybe we facilitate everyone within the catchment, but we're still 5% beyond what the expected capacity of that building is.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions from trustees. I just wanted to mention to the gallery, this item, as we rewrote our board meeting bylaw, we've put this item into the agenda now. It's always going to be at the end of the day. The public participation periods are meant for the public to speak to the agenda items and like the motions on the floor and that kind of thing. This is all operational stuff because it's the superintendent giving it. So rather than have an opportunity for questions at the board meeting, when it's supposed to be questions for the board, if you have questions though about anything you saw, feel free to email the superintendent. He will be happily answer your questions. I just wanted to point that out. You're not discouraged from asking questions, just not at the board meeting. And yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone. I know tonight was a little bit challenging because it was noisy outside. It is unfortunate that we continue to have people doing this to our meetings because it's not on the agenda. And I just want everyone to know that the Chilliwack School District supports human rights, and we will continue to do that, no matter how much people yell and scream in our parking lot. So thank you very much. The next board meeting is November 7th, 2023 at 5:30 p.m. This meeting is adjourned.